In the beginning, so there was quarks and gluons, protons, neutrons, electrons, and so on. The hydrogen atoms and Steves, get it? Atoms and Steves, formed these huge clouds, and gravitational attraction pulled them tighter and tighter together, and eventually there was fusion, which is the first sex, and they begat helium, and there was light. So many begats later, heavy elements, carbons, and so on formed inside these huge stars. And when the star would go supernova after its death, it would create these huge nebular clusters of heavy elements and so on, which also through gravitational attractions and such would form huge clouds of gas, which would form into stars. And then, of course, the heavy elements with planets and gas giants as our galaxy formed, and as our solar system formed. And then eventually, like clouds of molecules, of course, were also all around, and they would form into RNA, and on these, when the planet stabilized, and then cell membranes just naturally occurred also. The panspermia is another theory where molecules and even potential life like tardigrades would rain down from asteroids onto planets and seed them with life. So there's also the theory of the moon being created from a planetary collision, and that could have also had contributed some molecular things that survive. Anyway, the RNA, DNA, they would form encapsulation of proteins and such to protect them, and it would often they would be formed in a deep sea vents. So the chemosynthetic bacteria down there were using the chemicals of these vents as energy, and their waste product was oxygen. And when oxygen built up from that and other factors, they started doing a big die-off. So the ones that could survive that evolved to be able to adapt to that also had cells that would go inside them that would become the mitochondria. So with the O2 buildup, and that created this new life forms. And mitochondria giving so much energy allowed for multicellularity. Another amazing thing is all that UV radiation from the sun, because we had no atmosphere per se, so it would get down too deep, and the bacteria that would swim up in the vents would get destroyed. Their DNA, RNA would get destroyed by the UV radiation. So there was adaptive measures to develop light-sensitive molecules that would detect, be impacted by UV and let the bacteria know to swim back down. So some also cells would develop a crust of using iron, would develop an oxidized crust around themselves to protect, kind of like a UV, like a sunscreen. So this talk goes into the evolution of all this, and life will find a way. So the first thing, like I mentioned, is the protection from UV, the oxidization, and avoidance. Either you detect UV from primitive vision from that molecule, or otherwise hide inside other cells, which evolve into mitochondria. So the protection mechanism is detailed on this slide. And in the deep sea vents, I mentioned the chemosynthetic bacteria. They would develop an opsin molecule that's sensitive to light, which is the same molecule that's in all vision and all creatures on the planet. Of course, us as well. So the first vision was UV, and after that, then was, of course, like the blue light that could get down to the depths. So that great oxidization event killed off so many life forms. That was kind of the trigger to have cells find ways of avoiding that or using oxygen as a food source. So the evolution of the mitochondria allowed for multicellularity because it gives cells that kind of energy. So I find that fascinating. And one of the plants that actually were single cell and eventually formed into colonies, they also had eye spots, and they could swim, and they actively in this colony could swim towards where there's more light. And then you have different forms of sex in this sphere, sexual, asexual, budding, and so on. Pretty amazing creatures. And then the eyes developed, of course, more complex eyes. These are the eyes of a scallop. And you can see another picture of a scallop. It's really cool. It's a video link here you can download. It's showing you the swimming scallops as they swim through the water to avoid predation. So this slide just shows a detail of the first vision. Basically was to avoid light by the molecules, and then evolved into encapsulation and eyes and lenses and so on. So it's pretty amazing. If you can go to ias.ai website and find out more information if you're interested. So in summary, it's an amazing universe, this whole creative forces, and creates planets and stars, and so it's incredible. And the idea of life, how it rebounds from these disasters and finds ways of adapting, and then more and more evolution. So we are just basically creatures carrying these bacteria around. So I feel really connected from this story with all life forms, the common thread throughout. So there are new findings like that oxygen in deep sea with metallic nodules can actually create oxygen down there as well. And the mitochondria inside every cell, it's also not just an energy house, but it helps heal and provide energy needed in the cell, and it can actually migrate to unhealthy cells to help replace that cell's mitochondria. So a lot of research is being done in that for the future. And here's some links. Hope you enjoyed the show.